Hey everyone, this is Andrew from Private Investigator Advice, and this is going to be episode 85. And the topic for this podcast comes from a question. And the question is basically, how much does a private investigator deal with people if only doing surveillance? So that is going to be the topic for today. And this actually comes from a reader question. But before we get into that, just want to let you know this episode is brought to you by Private Investigator Advice. Private Investigator Advice sells a few templates on their website, which I'll have linked in the video podcast and the audio. If you look in the show notes, if you just listen to this audio only, there'll be links to it in there. Basically, Private Investigator Advice sells three templates. We sell the intake sheet, which gets all the pertinent information from your client, about your client and the case itself. And then there is the retainer agreement, which makes sure that everything is kind of laid out, what is expectations of you as a private investigator and expectations of the client. And so everybody's on the same page about the expectations of the assignment. And then finally, we have the surveillance template. The surveillance template is what every surveillance investigator needs to have to some degree. Everybody's had to have a template. You don't write these reports brand new every time and try to format them every time. You have a template that you go off of, and you can add and take away because everything's on a Word document. And I also provide an example report so you can kind of get an idea of how it's written and where different things go. And I also add a little video walkthrough to kind of walk through each section for you, what goes where. And so if you want to check that out, again, I'll have links in the video notes and the podcast notes. And of course, you can always find that stuff at piadvice.net. Okay, so when I found this article that I was going to talk about today, I remember this question coming. So basically, a reader reached out to me, like I had said earlier, and this was basically their questions. But I'll read the quote for you here. So the reader says, "I have looked into being a private investigator before, but the idea of having to interview strangers all day turned me off. Aside from that, covert surveillance sounds something like I could be fairly good at, and actually sounds like something I would enjoy. How much of the job is involved in dealing with strangers? From my understanding, you are geared towards the surveillance field, me. So how much of your time is dealing with strangers? I don't think I would have an issue with doing the every now and then. Doing it every now and then. Nosy neighbors pretexting, I can understand." So like I said, the core of this question really is how much interaction is there with others while in the role of a private investigator, maybe in particularly just a surveillance investigator. And I think it's a good question for people that are considering the industry and have anxiety about interacting with others, if in this role maybe. Okay, so one of the things is a surveillance investigator is going to have specific interactions, probably consistently through their surveillance career, and I'm going to kind of detail some of those out for you that I have had to do. This is won't encompass everything, but this is going to pretty much cover most of it. So one of the things is, as a private investigator, you have to, in some cases, not always, because I'm not a big promoter of stuff like this if it doesn't have to be done, but one of the things that you have to do is canvass a neighborhood for information on your subject, whoever you're conducting surveillance on, with a pretext. And so sometimes in situations you might go out there and there is just nothing happening. You might not even know if your individual you're following or supposed to be following lives in the residence. And so the client or maybe even the company you're working for will ask you to go with a pretext to try to generate some information about the individual you're supposed to be conducting surveillance on. And that might just be to the point of finding out if they live there through a pretext, or possibly finding out additional information about their activities and maybe some habits. And so there is anxiety for me sometimes going out there and doing this because I've been doing it so long, and I have this this body of work that I draw from and knowledge of what can go wrong, what does go wrong, and so this is one of those things you got to be really careful with. Just generally speaking, But this is part of the job. You will have to do that on occasion to get information. Okay. The next thing you're going to have to do during a surveillance, like you're not in a bubble in surveillance. As much as there is a bubble that you're involved in, like kind of by yourself and doing your thing. There's still people you work for and things like that. So one of the things you're going to have to do is discuss cases with not only your supervisor that you work for, if you're employed with somebody, but also with clients. Even if whether you have your own business or if you work for somebody, you still might have to interact with clients, and that can be kind of an awkward situation sometimes. Because you don't always have that kind of a relationship like you do with your supervisor, and the supervisor might have a better rapport with the client themselves. And I don't know. I personally, if it isn't my own file, like if this isn't my own assignment, like if I'm working for somebody, I'm always very careful what I say to the employers, my employer at the time, client. Anyways, you will have to, excuse me, I'm over modulating here. You will have to talk to clients and your supervisors, discuss case stuff, and sometimes there's going to be, you're going to come up with decisions and choices you're going to make on your surveillance, how you're going to move forward with it. Anyways, that's going to happen. You're going to have interaction that way. Well, before we get into that, I just want to throw one more ad in here before we keep going here. This episode is also brought to you by Audible. Audible offers a 30-day free trial. When you sign up for it, they give you a free credit, and that credit really is good for almost any book inside their library of books. Whether it be like adventure, like Lord of the Rings, or you name it. Like I've talked about the Liar book that I read. I don't know, it was a few months ago now. But those, if you can get those types of books where you can if you like that kind of fiction, and you like to hear that stuff and listen to those types of books, that's great. There's going to be a ton of those for you in there. If you're more like, okay, if I'm going to read a book, I want to learn something, plenty of types of books in there. So if you would, I would definitely appreciate it if you're interested in this. It is a free trial. If you don't like it, cancel before the 30 days is over, and it's cost you nothing. Anyways, if you want to check that out, I am an affiliate. I will receive a small commission if you decide to sign up for this free thing, and that's going to be at www.audibletrial.com/PIA. Thank you guys again for checking that out. Okay, so the next one is that you'll have to deal with as a surveillance investigator is you will have to speak with neighbors who confront you, and that doesn't always happen, but it happens. Like, concerned neighbors come out. They want to talk to you. They want to know why. Maybe they use the Nextdoor app. If you guys have been following me, you know what that is. I'll put a link to it. But maybe they're in the Nextdoor app and they've confronted you, and now they're like, what are you doing? Like, why are you in my neighborhood? And so, hopefully you provide an adequate pretext, and you're able to, be able to stay there and do the job. Okay. The next one you will have to do probably more times than not is conduct pretexts over the phone. And in fact, I would rather have you do this than go to doors. And I've probably said that to you before in the past. But anyways, sometimes you're going to have to make a phone call, and it's not like some in-depth pretext. It's very light. It's just to find out if your subject is actually home, because a lot of clients require that we do this, especially in the insurance investigation field, that we confirm that the person's home within the 4-hour mark or something like that. But anyways, it's not uncommon for this to happen. So you put a phone call in there. I still remember early in my career, I still do this to this day, but I got a lot of anxiety early on in my career making these phone calls. And then even later in my career, I still do a lot of due diligence. I like to know who I'm calling, where the phone number goes, things like that. I would do that for you. You guys should do that as well. But anyways, I also prep whatever I'm going to say, so I'm not stumbling on my words. I might even, kind of rehearse it gently in my car before I make a phone call, just so I sound believable, whatever it is I'm saying. Okay, so that is something that's going to be necessary as a surveillance investigator. Number 5, even though I haven't been numbering these, but this is number 5. In-person pretexting to an individual you are conducting surveillance on may happen. It may happen. And sometimes for various reasons that might happen. But back in the old days, so when I first started, this was standard stuff every day, and that's kind of why I talk about it so much. It's not, I don't think it's a topic as much as it used to be when I first came in the industry because there's so much more information available to everybody. But needless to say, there are times you have to knock on the door, and the subject you are conducting surveillance on will answer. And you might have to perform a pretext, maybe just to confirm who they are, get their, identify them properly, or just to find out if they're home. So sometimes that involves getting, maybe they don't answer the door and somebody else does. And now you got to do something or have a pretext developed to where you can somehow get them to the door, just so you know what they look like. So in surveillance, those are like the main interactions that are happening frequently. Infrequently, frequently, it depends on what the case is and things like that. If I could live in a bubble as a surveillance investigator where I don't have to interact with hardly anybody, I certainly would. That would be ideal for me. I strive in that environment. But this is just kind of part of the job if you want to be successful. And it's not, and it's successful from a point of, you're going to get 8 hours a day and things like that. Like that's when you're going to be profitable, and you're going to find the person you're supposed to find so you can keep working. Because if you don't, then you stop working. Your days are short, and 4-hour days, 5 days a week is not going to be a good living for you. So anyways, I will say that if you're uncomfortable in any one of these, this is, maybe this job might not be right for you, or maybe you just need to get, comfortable with the idea that this is going to happen. And again, it didn't happen overnight for me. I didn't feel comfortable, and I still feel uncomfortable about things. And I've been in this industry a long time. There's just certain things that I'm not like talking to a client or supervisor or anything like that, but when it comes to like interacting with neighbors and things like that, like I'm still nervous. Like there's still things about the job that bother me. But I know that they're part of the job, and it's kind of like something you just kind of come to accept, and you kind of work with, and you got to make certain things happen. So anyways, that's all I got for you today, guys. Eventually, if you're uncomfortable with this, you will get in a comfort zone to some degree with most of it. These, I know this isn't everybody kind of question, but there's definitely people out there that are concerned about that. They might not voice it, but it is. I remember being nervous just about phone pretexting just before I wrap this up. And I would be so nervous, and there'd be planes flying over the car, and I'd be like, oh my God, they're going to hear that. And then, they're hearing the plane at home, and they're going to hear the plane over my phone, and they're going to know that I'm here. And the reality is, over all the years that I've been doing, pretext on the phone, unless I'm doing like a lot of them to one person for some reason, which I don't hardly ever do, like there's no reason for anybody to be suspicious of something like that. I think only once have I ever made a phone call I can totally recall where I knew that they knew, that, and it might have been like the way the case evolved, and maybe they, were suspicious of me before I made the phone call. But I still remember it was like a really awkward situation. But anyways, so that's it for today, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in every week to listen to this podcast. And I will certainly have another podcast for you next week. And, if you haven't already, make sure you sign up if you're interested in YouTube videos with, the video podcast and other videos that I make. Also subscribe to the podcast itself. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, whether it be on iTunes or whatever your favorite, podcast app is. And also there's a newsletter that goes out. If you want to get like every post that I send, there's a way to sign up for that on the website as well, down at the bottom of my webpage. If you want to just stay connected and just kind of see what's going on, what's being shared. So, other than that, guys, I thank you again, and, I guess I'll see you guys next week. Take it easy.